Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Marche, the webinar director at Advice Chaser. We're so glad to have you here. As you're coming into the webinar room, I do need to do a little bit of legal housekeeping. Advice Chaser, the host of this webinar, is not a registered investment advisor. We cannot and do not give financial advice. Today's presentation is for educational purposes only and cannot be considered advice for any person's individual situation. Advice Chaser regularly hosts informative webinars, such as this one, featuring a variety of knowledgeable professionals, many of whom are licensed advisors. Any opinions, ideas, jokes, or principles expressed by presenters are their own, and however true, funny, or interesting, are not endorsed by Advice Chaser. Please do not act on the information you hear today without consulting a qualified financial professional. We're thrilled to bring you this educational presentation today. A couple of housekeeping notes for our attendees. Attendees are muted, but we do encourage you to ask questions and respond to our prompts using the chat box. And we will go ahead and answer those queries or address those comments during or after the presentation today as appropriate. If you ask a question in the chat box, go ahead and leave your phone number as well. If we're not able to get to it, we'll make sure someone reaches out to you after today's event to address that. Again, we want this experience to be as educational as possible, so please don't hesitate to ask for clarification or expansion of the material. Well, I'd love to introduce you to our presenter today, Rebecca Bradley, a Master Certified Personal and Professional Coach and founder of Partnership Coaching, Inc., began coaching individuals and teams to be successful in business over 34 years ago. She has taught coaching skills to approximately 8,000 mid-level and senior level managers and has coached senior level executives in the private sector in companies like the Coca-Cola Company and Xerox and in multiple government agencies. She also coaches entrepreneurs, primarily in the financial services industry. Rebecca is a founding member of the Society of Organizational Learning, a past mentor in the Georgia 100 Mentor Exchange Program, and has been a visiting fellow at Harvard University. She is a published co-author and frequent speaker on partnership coaching, successful transitions, and rewiring your brain for permanent change. Rebecca's current passion and focus is helping successful people make significant life transitions with confidence and optimism so that they are able to make their next chapter their best chapter. Rebecca, we're so thrilled to have you here. I know we've both done a lot of preparation for this webinar today, and so we're so excited to have you present. I'm going to turn the time over to you.
Thank you so much, Marche, and thank you all so much for being here. Excuse me, we know that your time is valuable, and we appreciate you spending this half hour with us. My purpose today is to share with you a model for navigating any life transition successfully. And today we're going to have an emphasis on the major transition from work to retirement. But the principles that I'll be talking about apply to any major life transition. And if you think about it, our lives are full of transition. They're really just one transition after another. I'd like for you to kind of take a walk through history and look at your own transitions. Think about the first major transition was from being a toddler to all of a sudden going to pre-K or kindergarten, and what that was like for you. Remember that? And then the big transition from kindergarten to first grade. Now all of a sudden you're a first grader. Remember what that felt like? And then now it's time to go to middle school. I have two granddaughters who are one's in the 6th grade, one's in the 7th grade. And I've been watching through their eyes what a huge transition that has been for them. So can you remember that transition? And now the 9th grade high school That's a huge transition as well. Then we have the leap to college and perhaps leaving home for the first time. And then when we join the world of work, we are now on our own. We have to learn to support ourselves, pay our bills. Well, sometimes in these days, many children are still at their work, living with their parents. So hopefully that's not the case for you, but I don't know, it may be. But what we realize is that we have, all these transitions in our lives that are ongoing. They never really stop. Even after work, we have the transition of going, perhaps being in a marriage or living with a significant other. We may have health challenges, loss of important people in our lives, economic ups and downs, loss of a job, a divorce. And what about the pandemic? We all have shared in the last 3 years, 2 years, 3 years. It's a shared transition. And for some of us, it's been wonderful. I think for many employees, it's changed the way we work, and it will be changed forever. But for some employers, they're not as happy about this hybrid situation. So it's been an interesting thing to see how that transition has really changed all of us. And some changes we consider to be positive, while some, I read a book recently called Life Quakes. Some changes can actually be considered to be life quakes. So I'd like to know how many of you are either now in a transition or in the last 5 years have experienced a life transition. And you can just, what I'd love for you to do is name that transition and put it in the chat box anonymously, just so we can see what kinds of transitions you are experiencing. Your names will not be shared, but Marcia will read, if it's a job loss, a divorce, child going off to college, if you will, just put those in the chat box.
All right, well, we're letting people put those in. I'll go ahead and read some of these out here. Oh, this is a great one. Working and going from work to retirement, selling and buying a house. I didn't think of that one. That's an out-of-state move. Permanently working from home. Kids going to college. Changing careers. A divorce. A major trauma. Retirement. And also, see if there was one more here that I missed, re-entering the workforce.
Yes. So you all know exactly what I'm talking about. Like the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus said, the only constant is change. So we're all in transition all the time. And here's the rub. Most of us really love routine. We like it the way it is most of the time. And so we fear change or transition. So what that means is the fear of transition is also a constant in our lives. So today what we're going to do is learn how to navigate the tricky waters of not only the transition, but the fear of transition. So in any life transition, there's a prompting event. And the events that Marcia just read for all of you were prompting events. The situation or a relationship changed. And these events can be internal. We become unsatisfied with where we are and want to be in a better, different place. Or the change happens to us. Our child goes away to college. We lose a spouse. And for every change, there is an ending to the old normal, followed by a period when our normal, our routines are disrupted. And we experience feeling really uncomfortable, confused, uncertain, and sometimes, a big impatience to get to the other side, or even we go into just a pit of despair because we fear that we'll be stuck in this change forever. And finally, for most of us, we arrive at a new beginning. And career change is almost always a huge change for us. It could be a demotion, the loss of a job, the sale of a business, or it could even be a promotion. I've recently been in contact with someone who was promoted, and now she is the manager of all her former peers. And she thought the promotion was going to be great, but now they have a whole new normal and nobody knows how to deal with it. So, and of course, the most significant change is retiring from the world of work after a successful career in which your identity is your job, your position, the contribution you've been making, the success you've experienced. And that can be huge. So here are kind of some of the emotional responses to career change. It could be excitement or shock, loss, grieving of the past or present. And if you subscribe to the Kubler-Ross model, there's potentially denial and holding on to the past or the present. You can go into fight or fight, flight, or freeze.
Mhm.
And there can also be anger. These phases are all very normal human responses to transition or change. We can expect a period of confusion, of lack of clarity, of anxiety, self-doubt. But finally, if we're lucky, if we do manage the transition well, we get to acceptance. And with that comes a willingness or a desire to move forward. And then we take action. And for those of you who mentioned the transitions that you're in, you're probably in one phase of these kind of different things we move through as we move into action.
It's really interesting what you said about people not liking change in general. And so that transition, have you found that some people even resist, making that transition because of the change?
Absolutely. Even myself. Yeah, I think we all, it depends on the transition, but we all sometimes just dig in our heels and say, I'm not going there. And, in some of the organizations in which I work, there are people who should have retired 5 years ago, and they just keep right on working. And the organization, treasures this person, but they don't know how to move them out. So yes,
Okay, that's an interesting dynamic here.
yeah. So here are the primary emotions associated with transition. There's fear, worry, and anxiety. And do you know the difference between those three? I'm going to mute myself 1 second. Fear. When we have fear, we say we're afraid of flying, afraid of the dark, afraid of the economic current situation. Worry, we worry about something, worry about our children, worry about our health. And so for those two emotions, there is a target. But what we say about anxiety is we have anxiety or we are anxious. So anxiety is something that we carry that may or may not even have a known target. It's just a sense of impending doom, of an unknown dread. And it can rob us of our peace of mind, our joy, our connection to others, our sleep, and our health. So unless we have a roadmap for navigating a significant transition, this anxiety can color our lives for quite some time. And maybe even at just a low grade, but it's still there. And we'll get to the roadmap in just a minute. But here's what happens, especially with senior level executives and business owners. Successful people I have known have identified these elements of loss that they're feeling. There's the loss of significance. I'm no longer feel important. Loss of meaning and purpose. I had so much passion for the purpose of my organization, and it gave me so much meaning to meet the needs of our customers or to do what we were there for to do. And now I don't have a meaning and purpose. Identity, who I am, was my position, my authority, my influence. Now what do I do with that? And then contribution. I made a huge contribution. How do I make a contribution now? One man, let's call him John, that I know, who sold a business in which he had invested his life spirit for 30 years, told me he didn't know if he needed a therapist or a coach because he didn't even know who he was. He had used his business to avoid any introspection and awareness by focusing on his employees, his customers, and making his business a success. He was terrified he would now fail miserably at what would seem easy, being happy in retirement. This man, John, was tired, he was burned out, he was now very wealthy, but he didn't want to give up the devil he knew. So he could, we could add to this list, loss of the devil we know, right? So I'm curious, how many of you are considering retirement in the next 10 years? Maybe the next 5 years, or maybe even the next 2 years. So if you would just type one of those numbers, 10, 5, 2, or whatever the number is, in the chat box, so we can just get a gauge of.
All right, looks like we've got lots of ranges here: 2 years, 5 years, 15, 5 to 10 years, 20 years, 1 year. So we've got a range here.
Okay. So my question to you, even the 20-year person, is you are preparing, or you have prepared yourself financially for retirement. And if you're in the Advice Chaser audience, that's what you're doing, right? You're working toward that end. But are you emotionally preparing yourself for retirement? That is the question. So I came across this wonderful gentleman, Arthur Brooks, who wrote a book. I'm going to just show this to you. It's called From Strength to Strength: Finding Success, Happiness, and Deep Purpose in the Second Half of Life. And he had a life crisis himself, and so set about to do research on how do you create a happy second half of your life. And this is a quote from what he found. He says, "What I found was a hidden source of anguish that wasn't just widespread, but nearly universal among people who have done well in their careers. I came to call this the striver's curse." The striver's curse. Don't you love that? People who strive to be excellent at what they do often wind up finding their inevitable decline terrifying, their successes increasingly unsatisfying, and their relationships lacking. So, what he said is these people are addicted to success. And this is what he says. Basically, we think of these people when we view them as workaholics. He says they're not really workaholics, they're successaholics. And that's what makes it so hard to give up. So here are some questions if you want to answer these to yourself as we're going through, if you have a pen and paper, to see if you have success addiction. Do you define your self-worth in terms of your job title or professional position? Yes or no? Do you quantify your own success in terms of money, power, or prestige? Do you fail to see clearly, or you are uncomfortable with what comes after your last professional successes? Is it just murky for you, or you don't like what you see? Is your retirement plan to go on without stopping? And do you dream about being remembered for your professional successes? So if you've answered yes to, 3 out of the 5 of those, you may have success addiction, which may make it even harder for you to let go of your work. So with all the strong emotion that we're talking about, primarily fear, swirling as we face retirement or any major life transition. Taking the leap from here to our next chapter can feel like this. Eek! Oh, help! Right? It's a chasm, and this person doesn't have any idea it's a leap. Or we may think we have a bridge, but right now it's looking like a bridge to nowhere, and it's in the sky over the clouds, obviously way far away from Earth. So now that we're all probably sufficiently uncomfortable, let's look at how successful transitions are created. These are the five, this is my model, the 5 components of successful transitions, and this comes from years and years of working with individuals who are navigating transition. So the first step is awareness. If you're asleep at the wheel and you don't know you're asleep at the wheel, what's going to happen? Right? And I'll tell y'all this wonderful new feature in cars. I have one in my car called lane awareness. And it's like such a wonderful thing for that little thing to beep and let me know I'm drifting into the other person's lane. Because of course, 5 years ago, I would potentially drift into someone's lane and they'd honk their horn and give me the finger, right? So it's so nice to know it before it happens. And so that's what self-awareness is about. It's tuning into yourself enough that you know where you are now in terms of the transition you're making. How are you doing? What's happening? What's working? The second part is to create an intention. So every successful journey begins with a clear intention for not only where you want to go, but how you want to be as you navigate this intention. And if you think about the great vacations you've taken, the ones that you really remember for the rest of your life, they all started with a really clear intention. I just want to kick back and relax and read a book on a beautiful beach. Or I want to immerse myself in the culture of Italy and experience the food, the people, the sights, the history. So those are intentions that created that vacation for you. And so I'm going to show you how to write an intention in just a minute. The next part is focus. And so focus really is essential for deciding what to focus on, when to focus on it, and how to use focus to help you move forward. And then the fourth element is action. Obviously, until you start to, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step, right? Until you take that first action, you're still in stuck mode. And so determining the best actions that will get you from where you are to where you want to go so that your journey is strategic. This is the most important part of the roadmap once you begin to identify the important elements of your own success journey into your best next chapter. And then in that process, what we're doing is rewiring. This is the part where you are rewiring your brain. And so we're going to talk about that in just a minute. So let's go next to the next slide, which is awareness. So here are some tips for building awareness. And these are not on the screen. I'll tell you these, and then we'll talk about these are self-coaching questions on the slide. But it's very important, especially as you get nearer and nearer, those of you in the 2-year range, to take a personal inventory of where I am now, either certainly quarterly, but maybe even monthly. And we'll talk about that in, the idea is that you begin to look at what's working well with this transition. How well prepared am I? And do I need to talk to somebody? Do I need a mentor? Do I need to begin to meditate and really be still and go within? or journal, whatever works for you to help you raise your awareness. Another way to do that is to fearlessly make a list of your fears. It's hard, but if you make a list and go down your list, you can dismantle your fears one by asking yourself, is it true? Is it real? Can I prove it's true? And what would I rather believe instead? And then notice areas of lack of clarity in your thinking about your desires, your directions, your next step. So it's almost like you're building a collage. And where are the kind of gray areas in the collage that aren't filled in yet? So identifying where do you need clarity? And then get clear about what you deeply want for yourself as you go through this transition and what you want in the future. So here are some self-coaching questions to help you. What definition of success will carry me forward? Many of us have a definition of success we have lived by our whole lives that we inherited from our parents or from our peers or from society. So do you need to retool your definition of success? What will be my why? This is your purpose without work. What shifts need to happen in my identity for me to be happy without my career? Who do I want to be when I retire? So this is really looking at the identity piece and what identity you need to shed in order to reinvent yourself. What obstacles might prevent me from moving forward, and how might I overcome them? So these are the obstacles of fears, limiting beliefs, ineffective behavior patterns, just bad habits, mindset and skill set gaps. And then the last one is really getting in tune with your soul's deepest desire for your life when this career is ended. So this we're talking about vision and legacy. And so then we go on to intention. And intention, I'll tell y'all, intention is so powerful. I cannot tell you how, when I have myself gotten real clear about an intention or helped others, this is what turbocharges your journey. So here are some ways to begin to write an intention. So first of all, assess current reality. What is happening now? And be brutally honest, including soliciting feedback from others about how you're managing your transition. You know, we can't really see our own current reality very accurately. I love the quote, I'm not sure what fish talk about, but I'm pretty sure it's not water. So, we have a hard time with that. So, get other people's opinions, and especially trusted colleagues or friends about how you're doing in your transition. And then picture exactly how you want to be, who you want to be as you go through the transition. Do you want to white knuckle it? Or do you want to be calm and centered as you go through this transition? And then your desired outcome. And now here's the important part. Write it down in the present tense as though it is already happening. This is your true north. And research shows that the probability of you achieving or manifesting this intention goes from 20% to 80% if it is written down. It's amazing, isn't it? Because then it's no longer a wish. It's actually an intention or goal. So here are some sample intention statements. I move into retirement with grace, ease, and purpose. By the way, these are real ones that I've helped people create. My faith guides and supports me as I create a successful transition from work to retirement. I have a thoughtful strategy. Notice they're in the present tense. I have a thoughtful strategy for a successful, purposeful, and happy retirement. So just in your mind's eye now, what is your intention statement? you want
Uh,
to just jot
Sorry,
it down. Go
I
ahead.
have a question about the intention statement. So sounds like this is like an overarching statement that would be maybe a theme for a transition. Can it be more specific if you're dealing with a specific smaller maybe thing?
Absolutely. It can be very specific. There are two schools of thought, because what you're doing is putting this intention out into the universe. And that is sending out a frequency or a message into the universe. And the idea is that sometimes we limit ourselves by making it too specific. My husband always uses um, this, this or something better or something more. And so you don't want to limit it too much, because this is how the universe knows what to deliver, right?
It's a good little trick, or something better, or
Yeah.
something more.
Yeah. Okay. So the next one is focus. Every morning when we wake up, we begin making choices about where we place our focus. And we continue that process all day long. Our attention. That's what we're choosing, we're making choices about where to place our attention. And where we choose to focus our attention, minute by minute, day by day, hour by hour, I left that one out, but day by day, week by week, determines the course of our lives. And making the right choices about where we place our focus is one of our most powerful tools for creating a life worth living, a life we love. And no one can take that away from you. So here are some self-coaching questions for focus. What is the single most important thing I could focus on today that would help me blank, whatever it is you're wanting to do? What is happening right now to distract me from getting the results I want today? I was walking this morning in the woods with a wonderful friend, and she was talking about how many distractions we have in our lives and how we have to guard against them because they literally derail our brain. What one step might I take to give my full attention to this area of my transition today? So how can I just take 15 minutes and put guardrails around it and declare that I am not going to focus on anything else but this area of my transition today? What would it take to commit fully to this area? I always ask people, what's your level of commitment on a scale of 1 to 10? And if they say an 8 or a 9, what do you think my question to them is? What would it take to be a 10? Because if you're not a 10, well, it might happen, it might not happen. 10 means come hell or high water, it's going to happen. So what would it take for you to be a level 10 commitment to this area or this transition? And what competing commitments are hampering my ability to focus on this area? You may be, your boss may have given you may have 1 year left, and your boss comes in and has the juiciest, most fantastic project and wants you to be the lead of that project. And you think, oh, this is a great swan song. This is a great way to go out. But you don't even have time to focus on your retirement. So you're so busy doing it. So what might you do? Say, sure, I'll do that, but I need a co-project manager so that I can be preparing for retirement as well. So the last question is, what might I do to manage both?
It's really interesting how that competing commitments can be. I mean, it's a good thing to have those commitments because you might be the type of person people can depend on and that they want to, hand those kind of big projects to. But it is a competing commitment to prepare for retirement, prepare for a big transition.
Right.
Interesting.
And then the next one is action. So as we all know, and neuroscience has proven, taking action is the important next step for taking advantage of our brain's neuroplasticity. If you want to learn to play the guitar, you have to practice. You have to play the guitar. If you want to run a marathon, You have to put the miles in. If you want to learn a language, you have to speak it. So here are some self-coaching questions again to prompt effective action. What one action, all it takes is one, could I take today to help me feel better and emotionally prepared for retirement? What is the potential payoff for doing this action without fail? Let's say you've decided that you want to investigate. I think one of the resources I use is called 101 Fun Things to Do in Retirement. So let's say you've decided you want to read that book to think about what might you want to do in the first year of your retirement. So what action, that's an action you want to do. What's getting in the way of committing to this new action? Well, I'm just busy. What can I do today to overcome that obstacle? So it's really looking at how can I find actions that will lead me to where I want to go that I can really get done, I can do. And then finally, rewiring. In the last decade, the findings of neuroscience, especially with functional MRI capability, that can literally ask people questions and study what parts of their brains are lighting up. It's changed the whole world of coaching and therapy, and also medicine, of course, because we know exactly what is needed to create the necessary changes, especially in coaching and therapy, in thoughts, beliefs, emotions, and in eliminating blocks and barriers from past memories and negative experiences that might be holding us back. So that's how we create permanent change. And it's way more complicated than that, but that's the overview. And what you see here is a brain and the wiring of the brain. And what's happening when you rewire the brain is you first have a new neural connection, and then that begins a new neural pathway, which is a dirt road to begin with. But then as you have that thought again and again, the new thought, it becomes a superhighway. And so there's a process for making that happen and making it permanent. And so here are these are kind of the principles of neuroscience and for changing your brain. So first, focus on only one area at a time. And so I know this sounds like it may take you longer to do something, but for instance, let's say what you want to do is focus on 3 activities you might do after you leave work. And that requires that you experiment with each one. So or that you might say 3 totally different things. The best idea is to choose one of those and really investigate that one, do experiments around it, learn about it, and so in other words, do it one at a time, not a whole bunch of things at a time. Because you can see with your brain, you know that you can't learn 2 dances at once. You can't learn 2 languages at once. If you're rewiring, you need to stick to one thing. And so the second principle is take action daily. Do something toward that particular thing every day. And then it doesn't take 21 days to make a habit. It takes 90 to 120 days to create a new neural pathway. And that is when, at the end of that time, what I say is the cement is dry. It's important to create accountability structures to help you stay on track, and important to have support. So having at least one person to provide support, and if possible, work with a coach. One thing to know is that in any neural brain rewiring process, in that 120 days, we most likely will hit the doldrums. So we expect it to hit a wall. And the idea is we're prepared for that and we know how to overcome that resistance. And then practice. Practice does not make perfect. Practice makes permanent. If you practice a bad backhand on the tennis court over and over again, it's just going to be permanent. So it's looking at how you're practicing and if what you're doing, the new habits you're forming, are practiced well. And then duration, working on that area until it's complete before you do work on a new area. And so that's kind of the model, that's the process. Awareness, intention, focus, action, and in the process, rewiring. And so do we have any questions now before we move on?
Yeah, I'm going to invite our attendees to go ahead and put any questions they have in the chat. I do have a couple here already. This is a good one. Do you find that a lot of people want to skip right to action without doing intention and focus and awareness first?
That is the classic ready, fire, aim, of course. And there's nothing wrong with that approach. It's just fraught with possibilities for failure. And then what do? So I would say you can do it. You can try it that way. See if it works for you. And for some people it does. It's just not as strategic.
All right. After you do clarity exercises to find out what things are inhibiting you, how do you identify what direction to go?
That's a great question. And, I have to say that for me, there's where my coach comes in. Because we can't see our own current reality so many times. And so having someone ask you those questions and kind of hold the space for you to really dig deep is important. And you can do it by yourself with asking yourself questions and journaling, with sitting and meditating. It's just not as easy. Did I answer the question?
I think so.
Okay.
And then this is one more I'm going to take here. You said that you could hit the doldrums. Can you maybe mention a couple of strategies for overcoming when you get bored of forming a new habit?
Well, the example is in the 1400s, the ships would be sitting in the area of the doldrums, and those that just sat there waiting for wind, many times the people starved to death and they just sat there. The ones that made it had longboats, and they got the sailors out in the longboats, and I didn't know this until I did this research, but they literally got in the longboats and towed the ship. It wasn't easy, but it gave them a sense of doing something. And so the question to ask yourself is, what is your longboat? What do you do when you get stuck and you feel demotivated? Do you up the ante in some way? Do you give yourself a new challenge? Do you get an accountability partner? We all have ways of pushing through that, especially anybody that's a musician. People know what it's like to get tired of practicing. So get a performance scheduled. Do something to up the ante. So that's what I'm saying. It's different for each person, but find out what your longboat is.
Really fun. Thank you so much for that answer there. And I will tell attendees, if you have more questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. We'll try to answer as many as we can.
So now that we're rewiring our brains to move to our new reality, really cool things begin to happen. Our bridge is starting to become more stable and lead us to somewhere. Now this one looks very inviting, but I'm not sure I want to go to a Scandinavian village. So, that one's nice. That looks kind of like Tahiti, right? Now that would be fun, but it's not exactly. So here we are, we're getting closer, and we're able to, as we get closer, our vision becomes more clear. So here's another potential idea. Oh, now I like that. It looks like a camp for adults, maybe. I've always wanted to go to a summer camp for adults. And the common denominator for all these destinations is that each has a sturdy bridge built on a tried and true process for successfully navigating through the anxiety, the uncertainty, and the confusion of transition. I love this quote from Yogi Berra, and in my experience, it's very true. If you don't know where you're going, You're going to end up somewhere else. So if you only remember two things from today, it's that there is normal anxiety associated with any transition, and it's dispelled with awareness, a clear intention, focus, action, and rewiring your brain. And by the way, the person that asked the question about action, this is what might happen, right? If you take action without knowing where you're going, you're going to end up somewhere else. And number two, by all means, ask for help. This does not have to be a hero's journey. You've worked hard for this, and you can make it great. And you don't have to go out and slay a dragon all on your own. Reach out to a mentor or coach and a support team to help you make your next chapter your best chapter. And if major change is within your future and within the next 3 years, then my question is, what one next step could you take today that would help you begin the process of formulating your plan for a successful transition? And you might want to write that down. What's one step that you could begin today to start help you start navigating that transition? And I'd like to close with this, but my favorite quote from Mary Oliver. Tell me what it is you plan to do, and I'm adding these brackets, with the rest of your one wild and precious life. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Marche and I really appreciate it. And please let us know if you have any questions or would like a follow-up.
All right, well, we have a couple questions here, and then we'll go ahead and end. Can you talk a little bit about people who struggle with anxiety and making decisions? What kind of tools have you found that work with people who are struggling that way?
Well, there are many, many techniques for dealing with anxiety. I will tell, and as it particularly relates to decisions, it's finding a good decision-making process that works for you. And there's lots of information about how to make decisions, even in the face of anxiety. I will tell you that anxiety clouds how you think. And so I recently finished an 8-week course on decoding anxiety that I was auditing that was done by a colleague of mine. And I'll share with y'all one of the techniques that she taught us, which is to stretch and yawn. Everybody do that. Anytime you're feeling anxious, and she actually suggested that we set a timer, and every 20 minutes in your day, and you can even fake yawn. Every time you do that, it actually sends a burst of chemicals to your brain that help you have clearer thought. So I've been doing that a lot with people, and they love it. Right in the middle of a Zoom call, we just yawn and stretch break. But it's a tricky question, and there's a lot, it's not an easy answer, I will say that.
All right, here's another question. Have you found that once in retirement, even though you've made the transition, that there's stages of transitioning in retirement itself?
Absolutely, yes. And they're different for different people. So it's kind of not predictable. And so the question for you, if you're realizing that you're in a stage and you want to move to a different stage, is what do you need to do to get unstuck? And can you do it by yourself, or do you need help?
All right, that's about all the time we have for questions today. And boy, I want to thank Rebecca for being here and sharing all this really great information with our audience. I want to thank the organizations that have worked with us to bring you this webinar today. For our attendees, look for an email with a link to the replay of this event. It will also be available on advicechaser.com and also on our YouTube channel. I know there's Rebecca and I were talking, and we said, well, there's a lot of data on here. People will want to likely look back at the recording and so that they can remember those thoughts. Here at Advice Chaser, we're all about helping you find a financial advisor who's a great fit for your life and your financial questions. Our matching service is free to you, and every one of our advisor partners has committed to offer a free initial consultation to anyone we introduce them to. Find out more by going to advicechaser.com and clicking on the link to find an advisor. Well, once again, from Advice Chaser, thank you so much for coming, and we will see you at another webinar soon. Goodbye, everyone.